What is this video for?
It's a documentary about breathing room.
Ah, sounds nice.
How you feeling? Are you nervous?
Yeah, no. It's, I just have a thing coming up at 5, so I have to.
We can let one of the crew guys hold your phone for you if you want.
Okay, sure.
I'm gonna have the nurse, and then is this in a good position for that?
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry, do you think the crew guy could put some mats down? The hardwood floors are brand new.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll just go ahead and ask you some questions and just...
Okay, they're ready. Okay.
So, is there an area of your life where you need some breathing room?
We bought our dream home last year. This is it, but it came with a lot of things, like a huge yard, which is great, but we also have to perfectly maintain it or we get hate mail from HOA, which also has huge monthly fees, but we love it here. This is exactly what we wanted. Exactly.
I have a relationship that could use some breathing room.
Could you be more specific?
Anna!
My mom moved in with us.
At work, craziness. Insane boss, and I have to travel, so they're like, oh yeah, you're not married, there's no kids in your life, and your cat doesn't count.
Well, my kids go to school with a bunch of rich kids now, so they think they're rich too. But they did get unlimited data plans, so. But that's practical, right?
This is a piece of art that he did. Eli, what do you call this? This is some Stegosaurus. It's a $3,000 couch.
My mom can't drive anymore. I have to drive her everywhere. Oh, that car's pulling out. Oh, the light's gonna turn red soon.
I'm not married. I know, Mother. Don't you think it's unfair how many dating apps I have to go through to find a guy and his profile is just him of hugging a tiger?
You ever pee with somebody staring at you the entire time?
I just got a new minivan. If I'm gonna drive them all over creation here in 2 with tournaments all over, I need some heated seats and satellite radio. And then you have to eat on the way. It's just, all that money just adds up.
I'm just trying to keep up. Take the conference call, take the client out to dinner, take the client out to lunch, take the client to the bathroom while you're going to the bathroom.
I just don't even look at the numbers. Transfer from savings, transfer from savings. It's kind of like driving your car towards a brick wall while blindfolded. When are we going to hit?
And so, oh, what did that hit? Whoa.
Anna! Mommy needs to ride to Costco, do you hear me?
Mom, remember the video?
Oh my gosh, one of the guys is calling me right now. I'll just press reject. What was the question?
Who's ready for a nap? You? Yeah, it's never nap time. Never nap time.
Don't use any of this, okay?
Does anybody want wine? Do I take this thing with me?
Ow! Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
What do you think breathing room would feel like?
Breathing room would feel like... yeah.
Well, I love that video. I don't know which one of those women you can relate with most. I know for me, when I see that mama with all the babies and the drawing on the art couch, and that happened to me, my daughter got a hold of chapstick somehow, red tinted chapstick. That does not come off. Let me just tell you, if you have any home remedies or anything that will get that out, please come up to me afterwards. How many of you ladies in here are single right now? You could identify with the single woman who is just trying to get everything sucked out of her. How about caring for aging parents? Anyone in the room caring for aging parents? Oh, God bless you. How about mamas burnt out who could not wait to get out of the house? I'll raise my hand on that one. I'm like, sure, I don't have to put the kids to bed tonight. Bye, babe. But anyways, I am so excited to be here with all of you ladies here this evening. My name is Carly, if we have not met before. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Sandra, who needs no introduction as she is here all the way from Georgia. We are so delighted to have you here and to spend an evening with you, getting to kind of pick your brain on this subject that you're here to share with us. And then as well, Jen, we are so excited to have you on this stage.
And I'm a little mad. I'm a little mad about y'all taking Joel and Jen.
Oh,
so
I would say I'm real sorry, but I'm not.
I know.
But this evening, we just kind of want to have a conversation understanding that every single one of us in this room is entering into this space in a different season of our lives and needing breathing room as it comes in the various ways and various capacities and what that looks like. So I'm just excited to engage in this conversation, and I hope that in this space we create that breathing room a little bit for you, or at least give you the desire to enter into this conversation as it pertains to our short-term group study that we have coming up these next 4 weeks here at Mission through our short-term groups. But in the context of this evening, we just want to have a conversation about breathing room. So Sandra, you have written previous studies. You could have written a study on practically anything. So what made you choose breathing room? What was it specifically about breathing room?
I wonder. This message has actually been a heartbeat message of mine for a long time. Some years ago, Andy did a series called Breathing Room. And when he did that, my kids, who are now 26, 24, and 22, and our foster daughter is 18, my kids were still at home, and they were young. They were really young, like kind of Jen's kids' ages, when he did this series, and it so resonated with me in that particular season. And I have found that in seasons since then, it has not stopped being an issue. But he did this whole series on Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is this guy in the Old Testament, and he got permission. If you haven't read the story, it's an amazing book of the Bible to read. But he was a man with a mission, and he had a very specific mission from the Lord to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. And he also had a ton of distractions. Some of them were people trying to get him off task. And he would just look at him and he'd say, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. And that was Nehemiah 6:3. I typed that verse all over everything, plastered it everywhere, because I was in the season where, opportunities come along. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes it's no. But I just felt like this is so speaking to me. And I decided in that season that my kids were my great work. And there were just a lot of things kind of that came and went, and I just needed some framework for that. So it became just a heartbeat message, and it was a no-brainer when I thought about what do women need more than anything. They just need some breathing room.
Yeah.
So I'm in this season now where I'm looking in the rearview mirror with my kids being kind of out of the house and grown, and one of them's married, and I just am really, really grateful for having said no during those seasons.
Love it. You're like my Mecca. I'm looking to you going, she
and there
survived.
were so many times I did it so wrong, so I'll share some of that with you too.
So why do you think it's such a big deal for women specifically, but also for women in 2018? What is it that right now specifically?
I think that for us now, we're, number one, inundated with options. We have tons of options, how to spend our time, how to handle our finances, what to spend our money on. We are inundated with more options than ever of how to do family. I mean, my mom and certainly my grandmother, they didn't have the options that we have, even how to do family. It can be so different. But also, I think what super, super makes it hard in 2018 is we're inundated with awareness of how everybody else is spending their time and their finances and how they're doing family. And it is so hard not to fall into comparing with that. But also, as women, we just wear more hats. I mean, you all raised your hands. So many of you are caring for aging parents. That's kind of the situation I'm in. My mom just had her knee replaced day before yesterday. So we're all in different seasons of life and wearing different hats. And I think for women, it's just really a tricky topic. Yeah.
It is. And it's, when you say that, I just think about all the hats that, I know I wear, and I know you guys wear too. If, not even just the big hats of being a mom or a wife, but also the hats that sometimes we don't take for, we take for granted of how much time they take up, whether it's being a daughter or it's being a sister, a neighbor, a friend, and then you compile all that and you're like, I'm a taxi driver, I'm the family accountant, I'm the chef, I'm the fashion designer for my kids' wardrobe. There's so many things and there's so much pressure, and we can't possibly do it all. And like you said, the hardest part too is, when you do take a second, you sit down and you open your favorite social media app, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm not even doing it half as good as my friend Betty or whoever. It's just always in your face. Yeah. And there's so much pressure to do it all and do it well.
We deserve a raise, ladies. So, Sandra, what exactly is breathing room? And how do we know when we're running low, maybe?
Okay, so breathing room is simply the space between our current pace and our limit. It's that margin between our pace and our limit. And in the study, we talk about it as it relates to our time, our finances, and our most important relationships. Having breathing room in those three particular categories are so pivotal and important. So we talk about that. So if any of these sound familiar, I'm gonna go through all three of them real quick. If any of these situations sound familiar, you might be running low on breathing room. As it relates to time, if you're constantly running late, dashing from one thing to another, trying to get everybody where they need to be, or just always like 3 minutes late. Anybody always 3 minutes late? Yeah. Anybody, your kids think their name is Hurry Up? So there was a season of my life where I think my kids think their name is Hurry Up, get in the van, hurry up, get in the van. So I don't know, which is which, but that, so we talk about it as it relates to our time. We talk about having breathing room as it relates to our finances. If the thought of an unexpected expense, like a blown tire or a medical bill or a house repair, kind of turns your stomach because you know you don't have the capacity for that, you might be running low on financial breathing room. That can be a tricky one and a hard one. Relationships, you might be making dinner, you might be washing clothes, getting everybody where they need to be, but running out of time for the snuggles and the communication and the laughter and all that, you might be running low on breathing room because those are the easiest things to punt. There are urgent things that have to get done, and snuggling, we all love that, but if something's got to go, it may be the snuggling. So we want to have that breathing room as it relates to our most important relationships too. We just want to have that time to do the things that are most important that our kids will remember someday.
Yeah, I bet
So
every single one of us can identify or relate with one specific one of those categories, maybe all of them. Jen, how about you? How does that hit you? Where does one of those line up with you?
The one that stands out the most to me is relationships. I feel like in our season, we've got 4 kids between the ages of 11 and 2. And it requires a lot of coordination to make our house run. And so a lot of times, it's Joel and I having logistics conversations, often. I feel like every day we try to have a conversation on his way from work to the gym. And that's just, we take like 10 to 15 minutes, and it's just like, hey, how was your day? Honestly, it's kind of my way to gauge, like, okay, who's going to be walking in the door after this workout? Maybe I need to adjust my evening appropriately. And for him, too, I'm sure he would say, it's his way to gauge me. We have our oldest, he plays club soccer, and it's down here, and it's an hour and a half. And it's kind of like, it's almost like we're fighting over who gets that assignment because it doesn't make sense to drive back home. We live in South Gilbert. And so we get to come here for an hour and a half, and that's like you can listen to a podcast, you can sit in your car and have just complete solitude, you can read a book. There's things to do. But when we have that conversation on the phone, that's kind of like, hey, you know what? It sounds like you could use or have the advantage of taking Talon to soccer tonight just so that you can, kind of recharge a little bit. Or he'll sense it in me like, oh, it was a tough day, the boys didn't nap, or whatever it was. But that's kind of our way to connect and go, hey, how was your day? How are you feeling? What happened? And then the last 5 minutes is inevitable. It's like, hey, so just so you know, when you're walking in, I'm walking out, dinner's on the stove, feed the littles, I'll be back. Can you bathe them, put them in bed? I'll take Ginger to dance. It's the whole dance of making everything happen. But if we're not careful, that's all we will talk about. That's all we will do is plan for what's coming up. We have a meeting every Sunday night where we talk about, okay, this week I've got a meeting Monday night after work. We've got this, all the things, the outliers. We know the regular routine, but what are the outliers? And so I can tell you from experience, I've been a stay-at-home mom and I've been a working mom, and you have to be super intentional about relationships or it will just fall aside. And unfortunately, what falls first is typically our marriage. That's the one that's easiest just to kind of go into the rut. But over the last 5 years, I will say what we've learned is that activity and proximity do not equal quality relationships. And what I mean by that is, it's easier being a stay-at-home mom to have a bunch of activities. But there's a difference between doing something for someone and doing something with someone. And just because we're close in proximity, just because we're sitting next to each other, doesn't mean we're close to each other. Joel and I can be on the couch and we can be sitting right next to each other, but doesn't mean we're close. Yeah. And so we have to really work for that and work for the relationship aspect, or it falls by the wayside.
Yeah. So that's so good. And I think none of us wants that type of a relationship that you described, whether that's with our spouse or whether that's with your closest friends or whether that be whatever that context looks like for you. So I guess why do we do this? If this is something that if you were to lay it out point blank for us, no one would choose that. No one would say, yeah, I want a business partnership with my best friend or my roommate or my husband or whomever. So why? Why do we do this?
Right. I think that what drives us sometimes to run on fumes, whether it's relationally, financially, just with our calendars or whatever, is it really boils down to some fear. And we identified 4 fears that we think really do kind of wrap themselves around us and cause us to push ourselves beyond our limits. The first one is the fear of missing out. That's always a big one. We're afraid that if we say no to an opportunity now, that opportunity won't come back around. So we kind of fear missing out. And again, we're seeing what everybody else is doing, so we fear missing out. The second one is the fear of falling behind. The fear of falling behind. Again, we live in this age of awareness. So we're constantly and chronically, aware of what everybody else is doing. It's really easy to feel like we're falling behind. Even though what we're looking at on social media is so often is not a reality, real picture of what's happening. But it's easy to feel like what we're doing is we're just falling behind. So what we're wearing, where we're going on vacation, whatever, somebody else is always a step ahead. The third one is the fear of not mattering. The fear of not mattering, and this one is huge in the monotony of just the mundane stuff, the shuttling people, the stuff at work or whatever. In the monotony of the mundane, we can very, very quickly feel like we're not mattering, whether it's in the office or at home or whatever. And then the fourth one is the fear of disappointing other people. And this is a big one, I think, for women particularly, such a big one, the fear of disappointing people, because we all like to be liked. We really do. We like to be liked. And so we'll, maybe sometimes say a yes to somebody in the outer circle of our life in order, and sacrifice the inner circle people. So, because we just don't want to say no. So I know, Jen, you wrestled with this for, when you were years ago, with this whole idea of not mattering. Tell us about that.
This whole breathing room concept was a really big deal in our lives about 5 years ago. At that time, I was the multi-campus preschool director at North Point in Atlanta, and it was a really big job, and I loved it. Like, I loved the team I worked for, I loved the team I worked with, I loved the women that I led, but it was a lot of responsibility. And at the same time, Joel was the lead pastor, and he had a really big job that he really loved, and at the time, we only had 2 kids. And we had decided years ago that when our kids went to kindergarten or when they were in school, that it was important to us to get them off the bus. Now, that's not important to everyone, but for us, that was a big deal. So when Talon was starting kindergarten, we had this whole conversation of, okay, how do we make this happen? Like, I have meetings from start to finish, and you have meetings, and we're leading big teams, and how does this work? And our bosses were gracious enough to go, you know what, you guys can go in early 2 days a week and leave 2 days a week early, and the other one would do it the other days. And so we had this whole system worked out, and about 5 months into the plan, it was just like, oh my word, we are beating ourselves, and we were just passing like 2 ships in the night. And so we literally were just like at a place of, I don't know how we continue at this pace. Joel would get up before I even got up in the morning. He would be gone. I wouldn't even see him. And then I would get home at 5:30, and it was the whole rat race of cooking dinner and activities and bathing kids and put them to bed. And then we would sit on the couch. We literally would sit on the couch and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted. And the whole time we're like telling each other, like, we're trying to one-up each other. Like, no, I'm more exhausted than you. I had this. And then Susie did that. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? We literally had no breathing room. And so, like Sandra had said, Andy had done a series that year. It was January 2013, and it was called Breathing Room, where he talked about a lot of this content. And on the very first Sunday where he spoke, I thought, oh my goodness, like, I feel this in my pit. Like, I know that we have got to make some serious changes. Like, this is just not sustainable. And so after the second Sunday, Joel and I were like having a conversation, and I kept putting it off. As you all know, Joel told you, I'm an avoider. So I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to get into all the feelings and all of those things. And so I kept putting it off. And as God would have it, we had a marriage retreat planned for that 3rd week in January. And we did them every year. We, went through an organization we really loved that prioritized marriages. And so we went on this retreat, and we were having this whole conversation, and I kept just like digging my heels in thinking, oh, I don't even want to talk about it, because I know some of you are wired to be stay-at-home moms. Like, that's like your passion in your heart. For me, I love working outside the home. Like, I love having adult conversations every day. I love solving problems. And I love doing what I did. I felt like it really mattered. I felt like it made a difference. I felt like it was a great way to connect families to our church and to get people back into a relationship with Christ. And so we had a really hard time, but Joel said, you know what, on our retreat, let's just go through, let's just look at our budget and take out your income and see what that looks like. And I was like, oh gosh, please don't make it work. Just don't let it work, because I really didn't want to. And he finally was like, what is the deal? Why are you digging your heels in? And in that moment, it was just so obvious for me. And I hate sharing it with you guys, because it's ugly and it's yuck and it's gross. But for me, it's the truth. But it is the fear of not mattering. For me, I did not want to lose my identity. I've never wanted to ride on the coattails of I'm Joel's wife. I've never wanted to just be, my kids' parents. I love all those things. I love being married to Joel. I love my children. However, I just want to be Jen Thomas. I don't want to be known for everyone else around me. I just want to be myself. And so I worked, I was seeing a counselor at times, so I talked through it with her, and it's just that's just in me. I just want to matter. At the end of the day, I want my identity. And so we decided on that retreat that I was going to step down from my job. I told my boss in February that my last day was going to be the end of May. And I found out in March that I was pregnant with a third child. And had I known, I would have never quit my job, that I was going to be home with a newborn. But the Lord knew. He knew our family needed. And so here I am, 5.5 years into being a stay-at-home mom.
In case it's just the best.
Yeah, most days. What about you? I know you've dealt with this. What would you say?
Yeah, I think as Sandra was listing all of them, I was like, oh, that's so me. Oh, that's so me too. Oh, wait, but then that's me. And then as you're talking, I'm like, oh yeah, and then the not mattering. So really, I feel like I could fall into so many categories as far as FOMO is hello. But I think really it boils down to for me, the fear of disappointing people. I'm a pleaser. I'm a people pleaser by nature. And so I think for me, when someone asks something of me, it's a yes, I will. And I'll figure out what that all looks like later and deal with the catastrophe of how that affects my schedule and my life and my kids and my family later. But I don't want to say no to you. And so that boils down and rears its ugly head in a really unhealthy way when it comes down to that fear of not wanting to disappoint God. Is how I've seen that play out in this last season of life, of just that fear of disappointing God. And God, is what I'm doing for you enough? And is it, then Satan adds on that compounding fear and shame. And then I have to realize, stop. God does not speak the language of fear and shame into my life. And so if I'm allowing that into my life, that is not of God. And then in this new season, I'm now staying home as well. And it's this weird thing of not wanting to disappoint my children, of wanting to give them a childhood memory that is worth remembering and is something that they can look back on with fondness, and knowing that Mama took me these places. And if I allow it to become unhealthy, it's the fear of disappointing my kids that drives me to our schedule, rather than loving them and wanting to give them great and beautiful gifts, just like God wants to give to us these great and beautiful things that he wants, that when I distort them, and when it all boils down to it, it's a fear, it's this deep innate sense of a fear of disappointment, that I am somehow disappointing others. So that's how it is for me. But Sandra, how does this play itself out for you? You referenced them, but how does this play itself out for you? And maybe a time when you have had to say no to something in spite of a fear of what that might look like.
Yes, I'll answer that question. One thing, though, that Jen said that just kind of made me think, that whole idea of going home, and you did the same thing. Not everybody is called to go home. Some of us are, some of us aren't, some of us can't. And that's okay. There's not a right or a wrong, but I loved what you said because I think it's so true. When we are excelling at work or excelling in, some particular area and we have to pull back from that, it's just natural that we're going to feel less successful. And I can so relate and feel what you were talking about. And the thing about going home is our kids, at work we get, feedback and we get encouragement and we get accolades sometimes and all that kind of stuff. And our kids, they are not going to give it. It's you do, and you work and you plan and you do all this stuff and you get everywhere they need to be. And they're like, Mom,
Yep.
And it's like,
You forgot my pillow.
Yeah, and then if you've got girls and they turn about 12, it's that, it's this thing at the beginning, so anyway, there's all that. So it's easy to fall into the trap of feeling like we're not mattering anymore.
Yeah.
And what I want to say to that I just think is so important for us to hear and to understand is we are children of God, we are daughters of God, and it doesn't matter where we are, we matter. I mean, that whole thing of our value and our worth and our mattering was settled at the cross. And we just don't have to worry about that anymore. But for me, if I'm kind of scaling it down, there have been in different seasons of my life, I think different ones of these fears manifested itself more. But the one that is always a thing for me is the fear of disappointing people. And it really can be a fear. It's not just I hate to disappoint people. It really, for some people, can be a very deep and real fear. And I just don't like to disappoint people. So the funny thing, and actually it's ironic, this whole breathing room project began as a not right now for me. We had done a 4-week women's study that our resources team at North Point had done, allowed me to do this comparison trap 4-week study for women. And it was so well received and did so well. And so, we were a year into that, and Jessica, who's here with me on this trip, came to me and she said, okay, it's time to maybe do another one. This one did so well and we had all this momentum, and she said, we need to leverage the momentum and let's talk about what we want to do next. And we both were so excited about the idea of going down this breathing room path. And again, it was a heartbeat message of mine, so it was kind of a no-brainer. It was like, yes, totally, we need to do this. But the problem was every time I got on my knees to pray, I was getting a no. Not an audible, God didn't speak to me audibly, but just an unsettled kind of a not right now to do this breathing room project, which made no sense at all. And so I did what we all do. I assumed it was something I ate. And I was like, okay, let's, just take a breather, walk around, run around the block, come back and pray some more. Every time I was on my knees about this project, I was getting a no. And I so didn't want to go back to the team. They had actually already spent some time kind of mapping it out, and here's what it would look like, and, just doing some of the hard legwork of it. And I had to, at some point, I realized, you know what, Sandra, this is an obedience issue. It's not a, do you want to do this project? This is now an obedience issue because I felt some clarity from the Lord around it. And so I went to them and I said, I'm getting a not right now. I'm so sorry. I have no idea why. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm so sorry to disappoint you because I don't like to disappoint people. But the funny thing is, not long after that, our foster daughter, who we had been involved with for quite some time, moved in full time. A couple of the girls on the team were pregnant, or just different things happened. And it became very clear that God knew better than us what the timing needed to be. And so, so the whole idea of breathing room is, I didn't have breathing room for breathing room. So there's the irony of it. But also, when we have to say no to things, and this is a good illustration of it, it's not always things that are obvious no's, like, another expensive girls trip or some huge Amazon, shopping spree thing that clearly we know we need to say no to. Sometimes the no's that we have to say are to good things and to, sometimes great things. They just may not be the best thing for us in that season, and we'll talk some more about that. But I did set up kind of a marker for myself. Being a foster mom and that being just a passion of mine, I decided that if I'm ever too busy to foster or to say yes to a foster situation, I'm too busy. And that just became kind of a marker for me. If I'm too busy to say yes to a foster situation, I'm too busy.
Yeah, so what we're kind of talking about here is just guarding our schedules, protecting our schedules, protecting those things that matter most to us. One thing I love that we're going to get as we leave here, tonight Sandra's team was kind enough to pull together these decals for us that say, if I'm ever too busy to, and you fill in the blank of what that looks like for you personally, then you know you're too busy. And so this card, we will hand them out as you guys leave. It's a sticker, so you can slap it on whatever you want to put it on that you will see the most in your life, to just remind you, if I'm ever too busy to do that one thing that you know is your bottom line, that is my most important thing in life, and if I ever get too busy to do that, then I'm too busy, as just kind of a health check and as a reminder. But how about for any of these ladies who may be doing the right things or saying yes to the right things? How can you encourage them in how to continue saying yes to the things that do matter?
Well, I think I've got a few tips that I wanted to share about just, how we can kind of stay between the rails. The first one is we evaluate the calendar. We evaluate the calendar. Have a conversation with your Heavenly Father, if you're married, with your spouse, and just determine who are the people and what are the things that are most important. What are our values? Identify those people and things that are most important, and then evaluate the calendar to see, does this list of things that are most important to us, are they reflected actually on my calendar? Because, we all know what is on the calendar is what we do, right? There was a season of my life where I had to calendar very obscure things, but that were super important, like calendaring my workout, calendaring my quiet time, my time alone with the Lord. I functioned better that way. So the first thing I would say is spend some time determining who are the people and what are the things that are most important to me. There was a season that I thought, my parents live 2 hours away, and I need to make sure that I am getting to Dublin, Georgia to spend some time with my mom and dad at least once a month. And so I started calendaring that because it was the way that I could be sure that these relationships that are most important to me are actually reflected on my calendar. So that's my first tip, because what's on our calendar is what we do. So regardless of what we intend to do, what's on that calendar is what you're going to do. And so there may be some things that aren't really appointments, but that you really need to treat like an appointment. So evaluate, make the needed adjustments as you have that conversation about who and what's most important.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but for me, the thing that we have to schedule is our date night, which is hilarious, because that should just be something that you're just like, I can't wait, I schedule 2 a week or whatever it is. And we honestly, when we were in Georgia, that was like the easiest thing for us. My mom lived there, and she babysat for us every single Friday night for free. And so it was like a no-brainer, like we did it no matter what.
Yep.
But then we moved here, and we didn't know as many people, we didn't have as many friends, and honestly, it was just like I was trying to keep everything together that went by the wayside. But I'm a quality time gal, and so I want to sit across from you. I want to have deep, meaningful conversations. And it wasn't until, I guess, last year, so we were kind of like just sporadic, like, hey, when we scheduled a date night, it was because it was out of desperation. Like, we just got to do it because, I'm falling apart here. And so last year we had scheduled a babysitter, and we just said, listen, I want you on just like a retainer. Every other Friday night at 5:30, just show up. Like, I don't want to have to confirm that it's happening. It's on my calendar. It's a repeat event. Unless you're going to be out of town or something comes up, just show up. And so, unfortunately, she went off to college in August. But this is a great reminder. I've got to do it again. And I'm going to ask you guys to be my accountability partner. So if you see me and you're like, you see me on campus, say, hey, did you schedule your babysitter? That would be fantastic to hold me accountable for it. Because it's, when money gets tight or whatever, it's like, you know what? We're in the middle of a capital campaign. It's like, to pay for a babysitter and then to go out to eat. And then we're like $100 deep. And it's, it's hard to do it, but it's such a priority. And other things we can do without. But it's so important that for us in our marriage that we connect. Because when we're at home, it's like, if the kids are asleep, I'm not far behind. Maybe I even, you were talking about snuggles, and I was laughing inside thinking, no, I do snuggles because half the time that's where I fall asleep. That's like bedtime for me. But to say all that, I do have to schedule it.
That's a great one, because that is something that doesn't feel urgent. And so many times the things that are important get trumped by the things that feel more urgent. And then you get further down the road and you find yourself in not a great place. Yep.
so true.
The second tip I would say is invite one or two trusted women to speak into your life. For me, I've got two women in my life that are my go-tos for different things. One of them is my sounding board professionally. The other one is my sounding board personally, and talks to me and asks about relationships and asks about date nights and when Andy and I are getting away by ourselves, especially when the kids were at home. That was a big one. Sometimes just the thought of picking up the phone or dialing or chatting with one of them, I already know what they're going to say. And so part of the value of having people who are wise in your life is you can think, okay, what's she going to say? I already know what she's going to say. So, just make the decision and do the right thing. But I think it's super important for us to maybe identify someone a little further down the road, maybe a little bit, maybe she's been a believer longer than you have, even though she's younger than you, but just in different areas of your life. Identify someone, a trusted friend that you can invite to say something when she sees something in your life. We all need people that we have invited in to say something when they see something, because so many times as we are moving in a direction, we don't realize that we're drifting, but somebody else can identify it before we can. And so it's super, super important, I think, to have women like that. What about y'all? Do you have women in your lives?
I'm 100% with you. And Carly, I don't know if you remember this. A couple of years ago, we were at Starbucks, and you were talking about friendships and how she has a fear of trying to be everything to everyone. And I looked at her face and I just said, listen, I discovered a couple years ago, I only have the capacity to be a good friend to two people. And she looked at me like, what? I said, seriously, I have more than two friends. However, I can only be a great friend to two people. And I just think in this season of life, that's where I am. We were leaving Georgia this summer, and Joel and I were talking about the friendships I have there, and just literally I was just like, those friends, and the roots are so deep. And we were just talking about well, how can you spend more time investing in friendships in Arizona, and what does that look like? And when we added it all up, it's the sum total of my week of investing in friendships is a whopping 1 hour. That's what I have to give to friendships in a week, and it's terrible, but I'm hoping one day, when my kids are out of the house, I will have lots and lots of friends. But I'm like you, Sandra. I've got two friends that they know me, they love me, they know what I value, they know my history, they know ultimately where I want to be in life, and I literally, I don't have to fluff it and make it sound better than what it is. I can just say it like it is, and they know my heart behind it and go, maybe we should pray about that, or no, I don't think ultimately that's where you want to be. I think it sounds good for right now, but that's not really where you want to be. And so I think having a couple of friends that you can really go deep with is super valuable.
I think for me, it's a paid professional.
And there is no shame in that.
Because no one wants to hear that crap for free.
That's
Amen.
awesome.
I'm going to get so red, but it is so true.
That's so great.
Good night. I've got so much baggage and so much stuff that we finally have. It's so true. And I have talked about, if you've heard me speak, you've heard me mention her. She is my person. I know that Midge, her name is Midge. It's like the best counselor's name there ever was.
That's awesome.
And she's probably listening. Midge, I love you, I promise. But she really, honestly, she is someone that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt is right there with me and is praying, she is fasting before the Lord on my behalf at times, because I am kind of that person for her as well. And so for me, it's my counselor, because that is just someone that God brought into my life at the perfect season, who challenged me in all of the right ways that allowed me to make the decision and the transition to stay home, was largely in part of her wisdom and her just beseeching the Lord on my behalf as well, and then prodding and knowing the right things to ask. So for me, that's my counselor, and that might be for you, or that might give you permission to go, okay, maybe that needs to be someone that I look into. The last time I spoke, I will say, her phone blew up. I am not kidding. So if you are, in all seriousness, if you are looking for someone, my counselor is phenomenal, and I will be happy to give you her phone number.
I'll take it.
That's it for me. So now that I've thoroughly embarrassed myself, Sandra, how about that third tip?
Okay. Moving right along. No, that really is great. And I'm actually really glad you said that, because there really is no shame. We all go through seasons of life that are harder than others. And when we do, it may mean that we need to talk to somebody who can give us a little more guidance than maybe a best friend or even a mentor can. And there is, there is just so much value in that. So I really am glad that you mentioned it. So, third tip is we practice saying no. It's as simple as that, and I'm really serious. We're going to practice together. When I count to 3, we're all going to say no. 1, 2, 3. No. Right. Sometimes, we all have certain areas of strength and all that maybe people want to typically tap into. So you may get certain invitations that are similar all the time or fairly frequently. And it may be a good idea to just practice a response for the next time you get that, because you realize, you look at your calendar, you realize right now in this season of life that I'm in, I don't have space to say yes to more than 2 of those things, or, one of those things a month or whatever. So seriously, practice saying no. There are so many gracious ways, and actually in the study we have an exercise that kind of goes through some gracious and easy and non-offensive ways that we can say no to people. And there's of course intrinsic value to saying no for our calendar's sake, but you never know who's watching you as you respond to an invitation. I had a young mom come up to me one time and she said, Sandra, I remember asking you or inviting you to come and speak at something, and it was in a season of my life where outside speaking was a categorical no for me during that season. So I said no to her, and she said, all of a sudden, she said, it dawned on me, oh, I can say no to stuff if it doesn't fit with my schedule. And I thought, that seemed odd to me, but I realized more and more, sometimes our simple and gracious no gives other people permission to do the same thing and to begin to prioritize the things and the people that are most important to them. Also, when we pre-decide and we kind of prepare ourselves to say no, it's a whole lot easier in the heat of a moment to do that because we're prepared and we are able to do it. For me, what dulled the ache of saying no in certain situations was that I knew that I'm saying no for now, and it doesn't necessarily mean this is a no for always. When I move into a different season of life, I can say yes to some things. And as I mentioned, Andy and I both have had categorical no's in certain seasons. And when I was in that season that Jen is in, having lunch with friends was kind of a categorical no. I had my 1 or 2 that were yeses, but beyond that, I just couldn't go have lunch with people. I thought this is a season where that's a no, and I'm not that super outgoing personality. I'm a little more the choleric kind of personality, so it wasn't as hard for me as maybe those of you who are super outgoing and you would love to have lunch with friends every single day. So that wasn't super hard for me, but there just are some times when you just have to realize for this season where I am right now, I have to say no, and I'll be able to say yes to that later, like traveling to Phoenix and speaking to y'all is a yes now, but it was certainly a categorical no in a different season.
I think I'm so glad you said that. You and I have never had this conversation, but you did model that so well. I remember, when Sandra's kids were younger and she was the pastor's wife, Andy was, he was over all the campuses and he was the lead pastor at our church for a super long time, for almost as long as I worked there. And I feel like you modeled that so well. I never got the sense that you were overcommitted or that you were at every event or meeting. And so I think when Andy did hand it off to Joel to be the campus pastor, I never felt like I had some pressure to have to say yes to certain things because I feel like you modeled that well. And I remember even coming here when we were interviewing with the board, and I asked them, I said, hey, like, what do you expect of the pastor's wife? And they kind of looked at each other and were like, absolutely nothing. And I thought, perfect, because that's what I do. I'm in. I'm your girl. Sign where? No,
I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah, I'm game. And so I just feel like, I maybe I have gotten too good at saying no. Like maybe we need to put a few more yeses. But like I said earlier, when we moved here, it was like, I was just mother hen, like trying to get all of our kids, like everyone situated, everything, where they felt comfortable. And it was a traumatic move in a lot of ways. And so I just felt like I was just constantly huddling my people. And I said no to a lot of things. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm in a season where I can say yes to a few more. But just like you said, it's like if someone asks for an evening obligation, it's like, is this worth taking away time from our family?
Right.
There are a lot of times I do take away time from our family, and Joel senses when those times are of like, you know what, I just need a girls' night. Like it just can be with a bunch of friends, and let's just go have dinner and just get away and unplug. And he has to carry the brunt of that sometimes, but he's willing to do it because at the time that's what I need.
Yep. And that perfectly segues into the fourth tip. We think in terms of seasons. I think when we frame our time in seasons, it allows us to appreciate the ebb and flow of our capacity, because I'm in much higher capacity season now. And so when we frame it in seasons, we can appreciate that more, and we can realize, I'm in low capacity right now. Hopefully I'll have more capacity later, but framing it in seasons I think is huge. And you're in that season right now where you really do have to think, okay, no for now. To certain categories of things. For those of you who are single, you might really need to guard your yeses, because a lot of people tap into you for your time and for your attention. And certainly you want to volunteer where you can, and you want to leverage this season of your life as best you can. But at the same time, you have to decide what your boundaries are and what your categorical no's are. So it's for everybody. And I think that you can appreciate the freedom that you have now as precious, but also be super careful with how you invest it. I think that's important to realize that it won't always be this way. Your seasons definitely change. So as we think about seasons, we think about a no for now isn't necessarily a no for always. A different season will come around. And for you young moms, and I promise you a season with more margin will come. And but the thing that I see on this side of that is when you sacrifice those closest, important relationships for other things, you miss stuff that you can't get back. And you can talk to any of the empty nester moms in here, or look at my life as an example. And some of us have regrets in that area, and some of us are so grateful that we did it in a way that prioritized, because you can't get it back. They're just seasons that, there are a lot of things we get redos on, but we don't get, the toddler years back, or the newborn years back, or the teenage years back. Although I'm not don't know a lot of people who are dying to get them back. But anyway, a no for now is not a no for always.
That's such a good word me, just selfishly. It's so good to know that this season, a no for now is not a no for always. And that's such a good reminder. But what would you say to a woman maybe who's here that breathing room is not an option?
Yeah.
Like that
Right.
sounds magical, but I just can't.
Yes. And, what I would say is, in the realness of life, there are just going to be certain seasons where it isn't a thing for us. Just circumstances beyond our control a lot of times mean that in this particular season, I'm just not going to have the breathing room that I need. And what I would say, if you are in one of those seasons where you look at this and you go, it doesn't matter how much I evaluate my calendar, doesn't matter how much I try to decide what my categorical no's are, I am not going to have breathing room in this season, and it's not my fault. I would just say to you, look at your calendar, trim what you can. Figure out, is there any low-hanging fruit here that can go? Trim what you can. That would be the first thing. The second thing is turn to your Heavenly Father, who promises grace and mercy in your times of need. He is the master of finding and offering that grace and that mercy. And I think as we lean into Him, and as we make time in the regular rhythm of our day to be in His Word, to be on our knees praying, there is so much grace and mercy that meets meets us there that kind of covers for some of the difficulty that we might be going through. And then the third thing I would say is learn to be, in this season, a gracious receiver. Women are givers, and sometimes we have a really hard time receiving, but you may be in a season where you have to open your hands and be a gracious receiver, and that is okay. Your time to be a giver will come back around, but you may need to just be a gracious receiver. And sometimes saying yes to people who want to help you is God's way of offering you that grace and that mercy. Mm-hmm. So if you're in one of those seasons where you truly feel overwhelmed and you don't see any way out of it, those three things: trim what you can, everything you can possibly trim it. Lean into your Heavenly Father, just in that regular rhythm. Maybe get up 15 minutes earlier than normal. Spend a little time on your knees with your Father who will meet you there. And then the third thing, be a gracious receiver.
I love that. I was talking to my counselor today, actually, and she was talking about how God stands outside of time and space and proximity. And so to us, we may think, but I only gave him 10 minutes. He stands outside of time, and so he can use that 10 minutes to impact the rest of your day or maybe even your week from that 10 minutes of time that you think is not even worth getting down on your knees and or doing whatever, opening your Bible. Yeah. But for him, he stands outside of that time. So is there anything that you and Andy are intentional about that could be perceived from maybe other people as eating into some time or space that could be considered breathing room, but actually you have found that it actually breathes life into you?
An addition to our calendar that has given us breathing room rather than taking it away has been in small groups. And, around our churches, we say circles are better than rows. And we say that because while rows are great and listening and learning is all great, life change happens in circles. Andy and I have been married for 30 years. This past summer, we had our 30th wedding anniversary. And we have been in small groups for 28 of our 30 years of marriage. Wow. And I can tell you that without it, we certainly wouldn't be where we are now. Having that circle of people around us for accountability, for care, for prayer, just all of that going through. We've learned more about parenting, more about marriage, more about life in general. Just being with that group, going through different Bible studies or books of the Bible or parenting things or whatever in different seasons. Has just been life-giving to us, and it seems counterintuitive that adding something to our calendar could actually add breathing room to our lives, but that is one area where that truly has been the case. It has been just enormous and incredible for us to be in groups.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. Joel and I both. We would say we've been in groups. Our entire marriage, even before we were married, we were in a new marrieds group before we were married. It was hilarious. They were giving us all kinds of tips. We're like, we're not married yet. Shouldn't we be talking about this kind of stuff? But it's always been so good, so helpful. And there was this one season when we moved here, and it's probably when we needed a group more than ever. However, we didn't know anybody. We didn't know who we could trust. We didn't know who was going to be in the church, long term. And so that was probably our toughest days. But now we're in a group, and it's probably the best we've ever had. We love our group. Lots of them are here somewhere. But we just truly enjoy each other. We spur each other on. And, there are times I'm like, oh my gosh, we hosted at our house. Oh, I got to get, the house has to be perfect. I've got to get dessert. But every time they leave, I just think, it's like the most redundant prayer we pray. We're like, oh my gosh, God, thank you so much for this group. And it's true, we just love them. And one thing I will say too, even this, having a group, going through this Bible study, going through breathing room, I have to tell you, it has to be something super compelling to get me on this stage to talk about something. But this breathing room and the content that you and your team have created, it is life-changing. It totally changed the direction of our life 5.5 years ago. And so I haven't done a Bible study here in full disclosure. I haven't done it. I feel terrible to say that. It hasn't worked out with kids' sleeping schedules and evenings and all the stuff we have going on. But I'm going to be here on Thursdays at 10:30 for the next 4 weeks because I'm in that place now. I did it 5 years ago, and I feel like we made some great decisions that really helped trim some of the fat that was in our lives. But I'm at that place now. I need to sit down. I need to rethink through some of the things that we have going on and go, listen, we need more breathing room because it's exactly what you said. It's the space between our pace and our limits. And we all are at a different place. We all have different limits, and we all can run at a different pace. And life is, you know, you say this in your book. Yeah. It's, you know, life happens in the margins. And when you don't have margin, it's not a quality of life. And so I'm going to be here on Thursdays at 10:30 in the morning with 2 kids in tow. But I feel like it's so worth it. Like, I feel like I'm really looking forward to what's going to come out of that. And I hope to see a lot of you guys there.
I love that. And I love that you said in your life experience, you've evaluated this before, but now it's up again. Because seasons change and life changes and things happen. And so I love that this is your ante up this time. Well, thank you so much for being here for this conversation, for this study. I selfishly can't wait to dig into it as well. I will be leading the Thursday morning study on every Thursday for the next 4 weeks. And in full disclosure, I told my counselor today, I think they chose the wrong girl. I think because when I look at my schedule and my margins, there is none. And in her true midgy self, she was like, no, actually, I think they have just the right girl. Because you're not leading from this place that you have it all together, but you're leading from this place of humility of, I need this too, and I'm learning right alongside of you. And so I can't wait to see how putting this content to work in my life will create for my family what we need in our breathing room and in my marriage and in my family. So thank you and I love hearing too that this was birthed out of breathing room for you, that this was something that you have practiced before you preached it. And that just hits home for me even more to know that this was done in such a godly way in your own life, how that fleshed itself out. So thank you for writing this content. We're so excited to dive into it. And then thank you as well for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I would love to just close us out in a word of prayer, and then the girls are going to come back and the band's going to come back and lead us in one last song before we head out for the evening. But let's pray as we close this time together. Father God, thank you so much for all of the good gifts that you have given us. Thank you for Sandra. Thank you for putting this content on her heart, because God, I really think that this content is here for such a time as this and for such a space as this, and God, it is so needed in our culture and our society, this concept of breathing room. And so, Lord, I just pray for the woman here tonight who maybe came not even knowing that this was what she needed. Maybe she came as an invitation from a friend or family member or a neighbor, and yet she has found that this is striking a chord. And so, God, I just pray that you will give her the boldness to register for these next 4 weeks and to dig into this a little bit more deeply and to find out what it is that she may be missing out on as a result of not having breathing room in her life. And God, you are a God who loves us just uncontrollably. And Jesus, when our life is so full, we tend to miss out on some of that because we're so focused on going from one thing to the next that we may be missing out on, or we may be too fearful of experiencing the full measure of your love that you have to give so freely out to us. So God, I thank you. I pray for every single woman that's here. I pray for the breathing room in their schedules as they may be going home and reevaluating some things. God, maybe like Jen, this is going to be something as a marker in their life that they will look back on for years to come, knowing that was the night or that was the season that it changed for me or for my family. And God, we're grateful for that and for the fact that you are a God that reveals himself as in such personal and unique ways to each one of us. God, we love you so much, and we are thankful for your unending love for us. God, we love you. In your name we pray.